bear with me. I never make this cake looking pretty because go ahead and know it takes almost a whole half day at least with starting and stopping. And there's a lot of layers. I look like crud, and that's how I look when I make this because no one's gonna come out looking pretty. Pardon my house, we're still under construction. I'm excited though, this is the first time I made this cake since the house cut. Well, it's not the first time I've made it since the house got messed up and I hurt my ankle. But it's the first time since I've been back in my house with the ceiling and everything. So yeah. Okay, so Memaw, from what Dad tells me, went to using just a cake mix. To me, when I tried that, it didn't give enough support. Memaw only did it with 3 layers. I tend to be stupid and go overboard with that. So I don't, but I also don't do the super skinny layers either. So the cake mix is our base. I'm using what's called a wasp recipe. I'll send that to you. So you use 1 cup, or not 1 cup, 1 cake mix. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, you're gonna be shocked with the amount of sugar that goes into this recipe. It is almost like, not recipe to cake, it's almost like diabetes on a plate. I hate to say it, and I can say that because both of our parents. Anyway, 1 cup sugar, 1 cup flour, because we're putting all of our dry ingredients together first. For some reason it makes a big deal in this recipe. Okay, and then a dash of salt. Never understood that part of the recipe. And I never know quite what a dash is. So, and then you mix it all in a bowl. Every recipe I've ever read about these wasp cakes is you've got to do this. I'm sure there's a reason. I just don't know what it is. Okay? Now we're gonna go to the mixer. I want you to know the camera's literally in a cup because I love my camera stand at school. Okay, now we're gonna put in our wet ingredients. See? Still have stickers on the windows. All right. So 1 cup of water. And this is bizarre, but 1 8-ounce container of sour cream. I know, the first time I ever made this recipe, I was like, I'm not making tacos, I'm making a cake. But it works. Then, I try really hard every year to not make a mess with this cake, and I'm never really successful. 3 eggs. I'm sorry if some of this is overkill, because I'm sure you've done a lot more baking than I have, but I figured this video would be cool for Kaylin, Casey's daughter, who wants to learn, and Lily, if something ever were to happen. So yeah, that was a bit overkill. Please bear with me. So this cake recipe kind of allows for some modifications or winging it in this point, and this is what I've discovered over the years works. So 1/2 tablespoon of vanilla. Yeah, I'm a little generous. And then this one is 1/2 tablespoon, again, a little generous over it, it's okay, of butter flavoring. The butter flavoring sometimes is hard to find. but it's kind of important. I've done it before with just straight vanilla, but there's something about that butter flavoring that adds. Now, I'm going to start to mix this and slowly add in the dry. Once it's all added in, you give it 2 minutes of good mixing. And at that point, that's when I prepare my pans. And I'm an idiot because I didn't preheat my oven. I preheat it, believe it or not, to 300. And then after 20 minutes, I knock it up. So here are some tricks that I have learned about making the layers. It really depends on how thin you want to make the layers. I am a bit lazy. I don't make as many layers as there could go in this cake. I usually do about 6. And that takes me 2 rounds with the cake mixes and the wasp recipe by doing it that way. I know there's other people who do like crepe thin layers and get it up to 6, 7, or no, I do 6, but get up to like 10, 12 layers. And that's just not me. So if you wanted the super, super thin layers, you would need to pour super small amounts in your pans and go with it that way. I don't. I tend to do 2 rounds. I have 3 pans, 2 rounds of these. Cut it to thin it or to flatten it, and you just go with that. I just don't have the patience to do those super thin ones. I have done it to where I've done super thick ones in the pans, just on one set, and then cut it. There's a lot of room for error. You end up with a tilted cake that can fall, and I've had that happen. So I have just learned 6 layers works best for me and cut the tops off of them and be done with it. Memaw only did 3. However, some tricks that I have learned that reduce so much time and so much hassle. First off is cake pan bands. So the first time I heard about these, I thought, sadly, the silver ones are my favorite. I don't think you can buy these anymore. This particular kind. You have to get the second kind that I have that I don't like as much. You want to be sure that you submerge these. You don't want to just rinse them off in the thing. They've got to be good and saturated. And you can tell how many years they start to brown and crisp as they dry. So you want them, I mean, not pouring, but you want them good and saturated. Put them, these pin, that's one of the reasons I love them so much. They're easier to get on. The purple one, which is the one that Wilton creates right now, does not have the pin, which I didn't like. You don't want to squeeze them out either. You wrap it, and then there is a loop that you put it through. Not a big fan of these, but I had to have another set, and that's what I ended up with. So anyway, after you wrap them, this trick was taught to me, got too much water in there. This trick was taught to me by, I used to take a cake decorating class. Parchment paper. Trace your pan, cut it out. Parchment paper, not wax paper. To Kaylin and Lily, don't use wax. Spread a little bit on the bottom. Put your parchment paper down in, and then spray the mess out of it. The reason I say this is about the parchment paper is, especially if you only have 3 pans like I do, well then if you risk it sticking to the bottom of the pan, it takes longer to get it out. The parchment paper, boom, pops it right out, and then I can immediately put the next round in because I go ahead and get my next batch ready while this one's cooking. I put them in at 300 degrees, not 350, 300 for 20 to 30 minutes. And then I'll bump it up to 325 for about another 15, 20 minutes. They claim if it's pulling away from the pan that you ever cooked it. I've never had an issue. I wait for that. It does take a little longer to bake that way. It just seems to do better. I've done it both ways, and this just way seems to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour my batter in here, and I'll see you for round 4, which is icing. Do not do your icing while you are waiting for your other batch, or while you're waiting for it to cook. You need to wait to do icing till the very, very last, okay? Okay, now it's time for probably what is the scariest part of making this cake, and that is boiling and creating the icing. So first, I would say Dad thinks that Memaw used a double boiler. I have never used that. My mother says she didn't ever remember seeing Memaw do that. So I have a Teflon pot, but it's not a thin pot, like it's a thicker pot. You don't want a super thin one because it'll scorch. I use a really thick pot. I'm a little nervous because the contractors broke the eye of the oven I usually use. So I've got this really big eye and I'm not sure how this is gonna go. So I started off high. Everything's already in here except for the vanilla, the sugar, the cocoa, the salt, the Karo, the butter, and the milk. They're all in here. I will say I did one of my rookie mistakes. It's not that big of a deal, but it does help. I went ahead, usually it's best to go ahead and get your butter to room temperature. I forgot to do that. So it's cold. So what I suggest, I'm actually gonna go ahead and bring the butter for the second set already over here, and it helps soften it up quicker. It does help to go ahead and have that butter defrosted, but definitely cut it into chunks. Don't just throw the whole stick in there like the first time I ever tried making this. And this is where the caution has to go. This is almost like making candy in a way. This is similar to making fudge. You don't want this to get on you because sugar will sit and not come off of you. So be careful. This is definitely not a part of the recipe that you can set and forget. Like, you have to be by it the entire time. All right, I'm gonna turn this camera off long enough. I gotta wait till I bring it to a boil. Right now, I keep stirring it, making sure everything is staying well mixed as it's heating up. And then I'll come back when it's time to start, when it gets to a boil, because that's when the next steps come. Okay, so right now it is not to a rapid boil yet. So I'm gonna try doing it this way so you can see what you need to prepare for. This is actually really hot because I'm not used to having an eye this big. This is hard. So you can see it's already got kind of a liquidy consistency. That's what we want. We're starting to see a boil. We don't start timing yet. Have a timer ready. I used the one above my stove and I had it ready and I guess it cleared out. Guess it thought I was taking too long. You will have to time this. This is not an option. You will have to time this. Because if you do it too long, it will scorch. So literally, this is like the same process as making fudge. I guess in a way you are making a fudge. But you can tell now it's getting liquidy. The sugar crystals have started to dissolve. We are getting very close to a rapid boil. All right, we're starting to see some action. We're starting to see some bubbles coming up in the middle. You want to keep moving it so it doesn't burn. Okay, now that we're starting to get those bubbles in the middle, I'm going to start my timer. And this time, you have got to keep stirring. Don't stop stirring. Keep it stirring the entire entire time, which is really hard right now because this eye is so large. Don't want to splash. I literally rest my rubber spatula on the bottom of the pot. I just kind of skate around, glide. Oh, I forgot to go over this. I have my eye on high. All right. In just a second, I'm not going to do this on camera because it can get kind of scary. When I turn the eye off, about 10 seconds left, 10, 15 seconds left, and then I transport it immediately, I'm still stirring with one hand, onto a trivet, and then I'll come back for that. All right, so a minute and a half has happened. You can see even taking it off, it's still boiling. This is where it gets a little scary. You put half a teaspoon of vanilla. Oh, I didn't do it too bad this time. Oh, there you go. You see, like, you get this chemical reaction. I still keep stirring. My timer's still going off for the minute and a half. I keep stirring until all of the bubbles stop. And now, you can see right now it's real smooth. It doesn't look smooth in the pot, but you can see it's real smooth when it pours. All right, we got to start letting the crystals start bonding again. You can put this spatula away. Oh, I did cut my layers, and you can see I'm still left with this. This is great if you have kids who just can't wait and they want it right now. This is 3 of my layers, and then the other 3. So, and my butter's nice and melted now for the next round. Okay, so this next part, there's no real science to it. I'll come back. You want to give it about 3 or 4 minutes maybe of letting it sit here and cool. This is where it's just, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, experience. A lot of trial and error on this next part. So my stuff is still pretty liquidy, which is what I want. But it now has like a skin on top. Just a second. If I move it, you see that skin that's on the top? That means it's starting to set. So I'm gonna take a hand mixer. I can't use my KitchenAid mixer for this. And I keep it no more than 2 or 3. I'm gonna do this 2 or 3 times during the cooling process. So you can see there's some air bubbles in it. That's what I want. It's still dripping pretty liquidy, so I'm gonna come back in 3 or 4 minutes and do this again. Okay, you can see it's starting to look thicker. We're getting close. I want to get a really good skin on it. There's another trick that was taught to me. I'm not as big of a fan of it because you've got to be careful. Take your spatula, and I'm trying to do this one-handed. Okay, hold on. You're going to spread this. And it says, whew, I probably did this too soon. It's still too liquidy. You want it to be thicker on your hand than that. Okay, honesty moment. I may have let this one go too far. Maybe not. I'm still getting some of the liquid back into it with stirring. But you can see... Yeah, no, we're still good. You saw how crusty it got? It is drying super quick, or cooling, not drying. See, this is what it looks like dry. You see how you can, it almost looks like regular icing? Okay. So now is when we have to start working kind of fast. So what I've done is, depending on what you do with your cake, if you're doing it at home, For, like, if you're making it for home use, use a spinning cake plate if you've got it. I have one. It is underneath. I am literally doing this on the cake carrier. I learned this the hard way, that I would always try to put it on a cake plate, stick it in the cake carrier, carry it, and that was just dangerous. And I put way too much on this layer. You cannot spread this. The first time I ever tried this cake, I was like, why can't I ice with it? It's not meant for that. You literally pour it. This has gotten really fudgy. It's still okay. It's just not pouring quite as easy. I do 2 batches of the icing. The first batch is in between my layers. Now, it's kind of a little too cool. For what I'm doing right now, this is fine. When it's time for the top layer, or not the top layer, but the icing that goes on top, I want it to be more liquidy than this. You can see I'm not trying to be pretty. I'm not trying to be cute. I'm getting this on here. And that's what is important. Ooh, this is really starting to thicken up on me. So even I make mistakes after making this cake more times than I'd like to imagine. I give it a good press. And then my last, or my second batch, is strictly for the top, for covering the cake. And I hope I've got enough here, because I've made that first batch really thick. There does not appear to be enough. Part of that problem is I waited too long. I let it cool too much. You can see I've got it pretty close. I'll just have to use just a tiny bit of the next batch to get what's left of this layer covered and then throw my top one on. But you can see how it almost becomes thick, like a Play-Doh. So now I'm gonna do the next round and then I'll pour it and finish this thing. This is when we start, it's kind of funny because it's this liquidy and then the crunchy, it's kind of funny. All right, so you can tell this batch is still liquidy, which is what we want. And I'm being sure to get the dried parts already also with it, because that's what's gonna hold the last layer on. Okay, it's now time to pour. The biggest thing to remember that I had a hard time with the first time, this cake is not gonna look pretty. When I really started to think back on it, it wasn't pretty when Memaw made it. You can't make this cake pretty. So you just kind of gently push it down the sides. This is why it's good to have like a Lazy Susan or a spinning cake pan. Oop, did that a little too fast. You don't want to do it fast because then gravity takes over and you get one stream and that's it. Now, what you can do is you can take your spatula, let's see if you can see me doing it, and kind of drag it and push it up. When you start to get that pooling, especially, I mean, you don't have a smooth cylinder by any means. You just can't spend too much time doing that. Otherwise, the rest of your icing will dry in the pot. Matter of fact, the first time I ever made this, I just waited for it all to cool. I didn't know that I had to pour it because I literally never watched Memaw make this cake. She always had it done before we came over. So I didn't know that she poured it. It took a lot of hot water to get that out of the pot. And it's already starting to crystallize, which is what I'm trying to beat. And I'm using my spatula to kind of guide it. It's now crystallizing more to where it's a little bit more okay. I've got it completely covered except for this side, and I've got to move fast because it's crystallizing. The more you get out of the pot, the quicker it crystallizes because it doesn't have the rest of it to have that residual heat. Got one more section. It's really starting to crystallize now. But that's pretty much it. Is you just keep pouring, keep trying to push it where it's supposed to go until it stays there, because it's still gonna try to slide down because of gravity. Yep, and that's it. There's Memaw's cake.